friends, welcome back again to another episode of Tactical Enlightenment. This YouTube channel is dedicated to all things Bannerlord related, and in this episode, we are dedicated to individual elite noble unit matchups. We are going to pit 500 of various different kingdoms' elite units against what I feel is a highly underrated noble unit, and that is the Aserai Vanguard Faris. So in this first of probably 2 or 3 matchups, we are going to pit the Vanguard Faris, these Jav-Cav of the Aserai, versus Sturgian forces here. Sturgian forces has the Druzinic champions, the sort of traditional sword, shield, and lance cavalry of the Sturgians. So now I am planning on using tactics in this series. I'm not just going to be slamming these units up against each other. We're going to use our head here. We're going to basically try to trick and fuck with the AI here, and then use the superiority of each individual situation to benefit us, of course. We're not just going to hit F1, F3. You can do that yourself. The point of this series is to show you that tactics with these individual units make them even more deadly. So what I'm doing here is I'm forming a center. Well, I'm moving too fast here. There we go. I'm forming a center of the battlefield, like you typically see me do in my episodes here. We're going to try to bring the enemy into our center and then flank and destroy them with multiple units. So the 4th and 5th Corps are going to be our flanking cav units here, and we're having them hold fire. I don't want them actually throwing javelins until I think it's the precise moment. Now, javelins, of course, is what distinguishes the Vanguard Faris from the other noble cavalry in the game, right? Besides the Khuzaits, the traditional noble cavalry of the Imperials and the Sturgians is a lance, spear, rather a spear, sword, and shield unit. So I have a unit here in a square, and these guys can throw javelins, and then behind them is a skein, and we're going to now start to flank this main Sturgian body. Main Sturgian body of cav here with these 2 separate divisions. So these guys are firing their javelins away. But the real damage is going to be done by these 2 wings, right? These guys are going to be flanking. I'm going to have them effectively charge through the sort of skirmishing Sturgians here. The Sturgians actually pretty readily broke up their cavalry here, which is good. That's good strategy. At least they're not being incredibly dumb and just charging the center with everybody. It's not going to matter. We have our 2 wings coming up in shields. That means they're blocking a lot of the enemy's attack, and now that they're close enough, they get told to unleash hell, right? And these guys have good throwing abilities, and they have 5 javelins each. Now, a javelin can do half the hit points of a unit if it hits them in the right spot. You can see the javelins are now flying all over the place, and we've now concentrated all these javelins all at the same point of attack, right? These Sturgians are now having javelins thrown at them up close, where their accuracy is increased and the damage is increased as well. Now that the majority of the 4th Corps' javelins are thrown, we're pulling them back because we're not just going to stand here and duke it out. If you don't know, the Aserai Faris won't win just a sword swinging match against the Druzinics, right? That's not part of their ability, and this makes sense, right? If they could just sword and shield and beat down the Druzinic champions, then what would be the Druzinic champions would just be absolute garbage, right? They have value. It's not like they're a garbage noble unit. Now they're superior with sword and shield to your Vanguard Faris. How the Vanguard Faris, of course, win is through their javelins. So early in this battle, and this is like 3 minutes in, it's already hugely lopsided, right? The Vanguard Faris have really softened up the Sturgians, and that's going to play an important role as we finish off this battle here. Now the Sturgians are wounded. This is a situation where now they're sort of outnumbered in most situations, 2 to 1, give or take 2 to 1. That's going to allow us to win here, right? That's softening up with the javelins. Even though you see us suffering losses here, I don't think that's going to matter when it's all said and done. So I'm still holding the center with those 2 divisions, and I may form the 4th also in a distractionary division, and we're going to charge them. You see I'm pulling all of these cav over here to the side of the enemy. Now that they're all sort of assembled together, we're going to drag them in a big shield wall and barrel right through the enemy here. The enemy's attacking all these units in a giant scrum. We're going to have all these Faris here combine in a big sweeping attack here to envelop the enemy. Now that they're close, they get told to charge, and this battle basically is already over. Right, these Faris are now coming in, surrounding the enemy in many situations. Of course, we outnumber them dramatically at this stage, and this battle at this stage is a formality. This is actually a perfectly fine situation for the old F1, F3. When you dramatically outnumber your opponent in a situation like this, and they're not making dramatic tactical maneuvers like pulling back or forming a square, or reinforcements are coming in. This is a perfect example where F1 and F3 is very viable. People make fun of it. In this situation, it actually makes sense. And it wasn't even necessary, right? The enemy routed probably after we killed half their force. Now, this is a tremendous victory, right? We have 72% of our troops and the enemy's defeated, right? This is an enormous victory here for the Vanguard Faris. So we'll also try, let's see, we're going to try the Battanian Fiends and Imperials. So stay tuned for that. I will just quickly reload this battle, save you some time, and we'll be on to the next challenge. Alright, so we'll have a desert battle this time. We'll fight on our home turf, although this really doesn't matter. This is more just theatrical than anything. And again, it's Vanguard Faris versus those elite Imperial Cataphracts. And most people will tell you, elite Imperial Cataphracts are great troops. They have outstanding armor. They're super tankish. In other words, they can slug it out with their sword. In fact, I've done this battle more than once. Full disclaimer, this is like the second or third time that I've taken on this full battle. I say second or third because the second time it was obvious that my strategy was not going to work, and we're trying this a third time. The first time I basically F1, F3 just to sort of observe the computer. And what happened was that after throwing their javelins sort of willy-nilly, the Faris engaged in melee. And early on, we had a little bit of a lead after all the javelins were thrown, but very quickly we got slaughtered by the tank-heavy power of the Imperial Cataphracts. You cannot just brute it out with your Faris against the Cataphracts. That's important for you to consider if you're playing the Aserai, right? You need to keep these units mobile. You need to use those javelins to wear down your opponent early on. And then you need to have effectively a strategy other than just slugging it out against Imperial Cataphracts. Then if you look at the statistics, it bears it out, right? Imperial Cataphracts have better melee. I think they have better armor, although I don't know for sure. That's mostly a hunch. And I think they have better polearm skills as well. So you're basically outmatched. You must use strategy, and you must use those javelins to high effect. So again, here we're baiting. Well, I'm going to use the RTS mode for at least a few of these episodes, both because it's easier for me to pull this off, but also so that you can see what's going on here. Plus, it makes for a cinematic scene for sure. Looks like something out of Kingdom of Heaven. The Crusaders here with Renaud de Chatillon. All right, so the Imperial Cataphracts are barreling in here. You see we have a ring defense. And then I have an inner core of guys here that are basically in shield wall. And the idea here is to kill their momentum, slow down their speed, all while throwing javelins. You can see the death spam. That's that initial huge volley of javelins. Now that the majority of the enemy cataphracts are attacking our circle and square, in come our flanks, right? We're going to bring in these flanks, and when they're close, I would say, about 50 yards or 40 yards kind of a distance. It's kind of difficult to estimate. Whoops, my character's getting mauled. That's when I'm going to tell these guys, okay, fire at will, right? Because we want them throwing their javelins when they're the most lethal. Now they're firing javelins, and these cataphracts are getting drilled in the back. Both of these wings actually are really unharassed, right? There's a handful of cataphracts attacking them, and look at this volley of javelins, right? This is just an absolute slug of javelins, and the death spam is just scrolling almost as fast as it can, right? It's a complete massacre. The enemy's compacted because they attacked our center circle and square here. Meanwhile, our two wings just absolutely dumped their whole load of javelins, or most of their javelins anyways, on that center cataphract division. Now, our center and circle there are pretty much destroyed, but the majority of our units still here are on the outside. They still have javelins, flinging them all over the place. And because of that numerical advantage we now have, because of this death spam, I think this is, again, going to be another lopsided victory in favor of the Vanguard Faris. These guys here, this left wing is told to charge, and what we're going to be doing is effectively alternating charges with defensive posture, right? We will have these guys occasionally in a square, and then we will have the other division charge, and then occasionally we will have them charge when the other division is in a square. So it's a little bit difficult to see. I'll try to sort of explain my thought process here along the way. You know, cavalry battles in big situations like this do kind of develop into a giant scrum, chaotic. You can't even barely tell who's who and who's where. So I'm going to try to enumerate this. I'm moving one division into a square here. In fact, you can see the second and third are now gone, right? Those divisions are no longer under my control because they have either been destroyed or routed. My other division, I'm pulling it over this ridge, and that's because we want to make this coordinated, combined cavalry charge, right? Just like the legendary cavalry charge of like the Napoleonic era, or the relief of the siege of Vienna, right? We want to have a huge cavalry charge here. Now the enemy's starting to stack up on our square. That's what I want, right? We want the enemy looking the other way, sort of obsessed with our square, while those guys hold defense. And there's still cataphracts in here, right? But these guys are outnumbered. So our cav over there is doing good work. The square is essentially just trying to hold out, right? I want these guys to survive. I'm dragging the enemy there, kind of trying to grab as much attention as I can. These guys are actually doing really well, just kind of skirmishing over here, and that's because I think so many units are attacking the square that they outnumber the cataphracts there. But now it's time to drag this square and attack the square with this line of cavalry. It's 186 guys. These guys coming in a big, devastating charge right up the back of all of these cataphracts is really going to cause carnage here. I'll try to bring you into the action down here. You can see they're chasing after our square, right? These look exactly like a little kid who just had their lunch money stolen. They're chasing after them. And unfortunately for these kids, right, the bully, the real bully in town is coming over this ridge momentarily, right? Here comes 178 Vanguard Faris. We're going to bring them right into here. I'm actually forming the formation directly into these cataphracts, and now they're close. They get told to charge, and it's just a devastating spear attack directly behind the enemy. And you can see the death span. It's obviously highly in the Vanguard Faris's favor. Now, we can continue to do a little bit of maneuvering kind of on and off at this stage, but this battle is now over. We now hold probably a 2-to-1, maybe even a 3-to-1 numerical advantage on the enemy. So even though they're better at melee, even though, I said earlier you can't really brute it out, this is one of those situations where you probably can, right? You can probably just tell everybody F1, F3, shield wall, F1, F3, and that'll be that. And in fact, the enemy's routing. They recognize that they can't win this battle, just like someone tipping over their king in a chess match. We're victorious. And again, over half of our troops survive. So this is 50% survival rate against the supposedly dominant Imperial elite cataphract. A KDR of almost 1.5 to 1. This is an outstanding, dominating victory again. So we've now dispatched the Sturgian noble unit. We've now dispatched the Imperial noble unit. Next is going to be a really interesting challenge. Let's try Battanian Fiend Champs. I know a lot of people out there probably think there's no way you can win this, but we're going to try to interrupt them. We're going to try to use some tactics and see how we do. All right, so a couple seconds to reconfigure this. Battania, we want Battanian Fiend Champs only, and we want to give them a good captain here, something that benefits all their units. Here we go, increased range damage. So now they have a commander that'll increase their damage. And again, we will fight in the open field. Now, it's interesting. I think if I played Battania here, I would actually crush the Faris. And it kind of shows how the AI can be manipulated, how tactics really do matter, right? It's basically you could have the mirrored situation, and I'm confident I could win in either manner. The point of that is to say that I don't think there's not like a superiority of one unit or the other. I think if they're used correctly, if you know how to basically destroy the AI in this situation, it doesn't really matter which side you play. I think, all things considered, Bannerlord is actually remarkably balanced. I don't think there's an overpowering individual kingdom. Just a 30-second monologue on that. I do think there are some kingdoms that I prefer for my playstyle. I know some people think that once you get a high-ranked army of Khuzaits, you become unbeatable, and that might be the case. I've never really played a Khuzaits campaign to the very end, although I've done custom battles with Khan's guards and whatnot, and I've laid waste to everything. But I do think there's quite a bit of remarkable balance, and in my own campaign, anyways, I've completely demolished Khuzaits and the enemy AI using tactics. I think they are beatable. Although if I had like gun to my head, if I had to say, you know, there's one kingdom that could be nerfed, it's probably Khuzaits. All right, so this is what I'm looking for. I wanted to get one of these cav divisions. We've got 4 divisions that was perpendicular to the enemy line. Now that they're perpendicular, we're going to bring them in a big fat shield wall, and these guys really have one job right now, and that is to occupy and interrupt the Battanians while the rest of our units kill. You can see the Battanians are trying to form like a big snake formation. Our units have been on hold fire until they get close. We're now going to surround the enemy. Now that this 129 guys of this 4th Corps are charging in, it's going to knock Battanian Fiend Champs around. It's going to interrupt them, and they're in shield wall, right? So those guys are going to suffer fairly minimal damage while the rest of the units move in. Now they're close. They are told to charge, and these 2 units on the left here are just told to come up and shield wall and open fire. What that does is turn all these guys into mobile Battanian wildlings, right? They're throwing hundreds of javelins. In fact, you can see the death spam here. The Battanian Fiends are not very effective right now because they're being chased around by other cav. This is an example of how using 3 or 4 units is much more effective than using 1. I think if you just had 1 unit of Faris here, I don't know if you can actually win. I think that's how difficult it is with 1 unit. All right, so our 4th Division continues to act as sort of the distractionary bully here while we fishtail the rest of our units around in a big curly queue, basically trying to get good line of sight to throw these javelins, right? It's like a quasi surround and drown situation. We're surrounding the enemy here and also, of course, interrupting them constantly with this 4th Division. I'm actually just physically pulling them through. I'm putting where I want them to go, literally on the opposite side of the Battanians, because I simply want them running through, knocking guys over. Some of the guys will get speared. The biggest thing I want, though, is I want them not shooting. You can see the Battanian Fiends are literally running. Well, that's disaster for them, right? If this was me taking over the Battanians, all of a sudden, I would tell them to stop, charge, right? You'd want them all immediately to charge. Because once they're running like that, obviously they can't do any damage. And in a way, this is definitely just exploiting the AI. The AI is looking for some kind of safe spot to shoot. A few of the Battanian Fiends are shooting, but most of them are running, trying to get to a spot where they think it's safe. Well, obviously we're aware of that, and we're simply not going to let them do that. We have 4 cav divisions, and they're never going to get unharassed now in this battle. I mean, we've surrounded them. It's like a pack of wolves, just completely swarming, destroying caribou. Now we have our other side charging in. And at this stage, I would have absolutely no problem with the shield wall. F1, F3, everybody charge, right? The enemy's completely overwhelmed and surrounded. Almost half of their units are already dead, and we've suffered maybe 50 casualties. This is actually a really ugly massacre. And again, this is partly because the AI is programmed to try to find a safe spot for them to shoot. It doesn't want them to shoot while they're being trucked. If this is ever happening to you, the absolute worst thing you could do is to keep moving. Right? You want your guys shooting. At least if they charged, some of them would whip out their swords and try to kill guys, and the rest would just stand where they are and fire arrows. What they're doing right now is disaster. And the death spam, is represented by that, right? This is actually going much worse even than the Imperial cataphracts, simply because the AI right here has been short-circuited. And again, I've said this before, enjoy this bad AI before generative AI makes us all cry, right? We'll be reaching for the ibuprofen and the difficult button to lower it once generative AI is just making us all look like feeble humans. For now, we will abuse the AI and take advantage. I mean, they're down to about probably 150 Battanian Fiends. I don't actually think I'm going to play this all the way out. You can tell at this stage that this has been just a complete, utter massacre. There's just nothing but dead Battanians all over the place. We've lost maybe 70 units, 80 units. And the Battanians, half of them are routing now, half of them are feebly trying to find a spot to shoot from. And of course, they're just harassed, stabbed, thrown a javelin in the back. This was an absolute massacre. So 3 up, 3 down, right? This is the 3 noble units, the Battanians, the Imperials, and the Sturgians, all just wasted by this, so-called mediocre Vanguard Faris. And look at this result, right? We have 87% of our units still up on the field, right? The Battanians are utterly routed here. So I think it's on to, I think this will be the final challenge. We will take on the Khan's guards. All right, quickly reloaded here. We now have the Aserai Vanguard Faris. Let's give this a shot against the terrifying Khan's guard, right? They're basically a complete unit. They can trample you with their horse, they can mash you with their glaive, and of course they have outstanding bow skills, all while being mobile. A lot of people feel like they're the best noble unit, and I'm not here to agree or disagree so much as to say I do tend to agree that they're really, really strong. I'm not going to say whether or not they're the best or not. It really depends on the situation. For all around, keep siege and stuff like that, I would tend to prefer a Battanian Fiend. In the open field, though, it is kind of hard to argue against the Khan's guards. All right, so just like before, we're going to have 4 divisions here. We'll use the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 6th, and we're going to try to surround the enemy. Now, admittedly, and some people have mentioned this before, this is sort of like cheating with the RTS mod. In fact, I'll just tell you right now that I've tried this twice already using the first-person perspective. It didn't go very well. The second time, I actually got shot off my horse, and chaos ensued because the AI briefly took over. The first, I was able to stay on my horse for most of the battle, but even though we surrounded them pretty well, we still lost. So we'll see. We'll see if I can actually win. We should be able to surround them pretty well here. Using the RTS mod, this overhead view mod, we'll see if we can corral them a bit here. Of course, it's very hard to corral horse archers, but if you were ever going to do it, it would be with a Jav-Cav unit like the Vanguard Faris. So the 2nd and 3rd, of course, are in shield wall. They're our primary bait and defense in this strategy, right? We're moving them forward. We want to sort of hem the enemy in here, right? We're trying to corral them. It's like having a bunch of cattle out on the ranch. That 2nd and 3rd division is acting as sort of our bait. The enemy's pouring in, and we're basically going to try to cut them off as they try to circle us here. I'm moving the 6th behind him here. The 5th is in front of him, told to be in a shield wall and fire at will. Now these guys are firing javelins in there, and the enemy's sort of trying to retreat, but I think we're going to be able to completely surround them here. I've got the 6th in a beautiful position, or excuse me, the 5th on the other side. The 6th is in a huge long shield wall. That's really going to make it hard for the enemy to get out, and we have really corralled them into a death ball here. So we should be able to win this victory now. Completely surrounding the enemy. In fact, they have no ability as horse archers to escape. They've been completely surrounded here, and now the javelins start getting flung. Right, hundreds of javelins. We're closing in the net, so to speak. Here, it's actually really pretty. It just looks like a bunch of trapped fish. And the dolphins are moving in, and of course they're compacted, so they're taking a lot of javelins. Now here's the question: what happens when we run out of javelins? Right, the Vanguard Faris do not have good melee skills, and the Khan's guards, especially in a situation like this, to brood it out, is going to whip out their glaive, and it's going to be nasty. This is not going to be just as easy as it looks. Still, talk about a perfect square, right? These guys are literally hemmed in. They might as well just get off their horses because we have them incredibly well hemmed in here. The javelins are still flying. We're tightening up our net. All our units are in shield wall. And I wasn't able to achieve this nasty of a formation using the first-person perspective. This would be very difficult to do this. In fact, this would probably be difficult for me to repeat this. If I fought this battle again with the RTS mod, I still might not be able to tighten in as well as I did here. All right, so the final push here, we're outnumbering them by about 50% now. Let's see if our Vanguard Faris can take them down in melee. I think, you know, outnumbering him 2-1, we should have a chance. It's kind of a mix of death spam right now. There's still a few guys firing javelins. But it's not nearly as lopsided as you would expect it to be. Most other units, if they were surrounded like this, they would be fucking toast. If this was, you know, if you had a bunch of Imperial elite cataphracts wrapped around a bunch of Vanguard Faris, it's curtains. And it's close. I see quite a few of our guys dying. In fact, the death waves are starting to get a little thicker here as the enemy whips out their glaives. They're not shooting. Most of these guys are not anyways. There's a handful of guys in the center I see shooting, but most of this is just glaive work. I'm not surprised. As someone who plays Bannerlord primarily with a polearm, a swingable polearm, I'm not shocked. A swingable polearm on a horse is absolutely fucking devastating. And of course the Vanguard Faris have these sort of mediocre sword and shield skills. It's going badly. I still think we can win, but it's not going terrifically. I'm going to try to get some charge damage here with one of our divisions, sort of changing tactics because it doesn't look good. But I don't know if this is going to be effective. It's hard to charge a unit when it's sort of crammed into the middle here, right? They're all bound up with Arcav kind of in the middle, and it's going very badly. The death spam has turned decidedly red. Let's see what this charge does here. We're getting shot off our horses now. I mean, it's actually a massacre, despite the fact that we surrounded the Khans guards almost perfectly there. Some of the Khans guards are out now and they're shooting their arrows. If we do win, it's gonna be super close. I've got the ability to speed it up here. We can just increase the speed. In fact, let's increase this a lot here. This is the RTS mod I'm using. It's perfect for experiments like this, and now we can watch the numbers. You don't need to actually watch the battlefield here. You can just tell by the numbers. And it looks like it's going to be either a draw or a loss at this stage. We're getting a few kills here and there, but it doesn't look real promising. So I'm not going to be doing, whoops, I hit the wrong button. I'm not going to be doing an episode that shows how underrated the Khans guards are. Why? Because everybody loves the Khans guards, right? This episode here, even though it looks like it's razor close, but even though it looks like the Khans guards are actually going to win this battle here, the Vanguard Faris maybe are not perfectly suited to battle Khans guards. I still think this episode shows clearly that the Aserai Vanguard Faris, when used correctly, can be devastating in Bannerlord, right? We just cast aside the Imperial elite cataphracts, we kick to the sand the Drunzinic champion, and of course slightly to moderately to majorly abusing the AI, we absolutely destroyed the legendary Battanian Fiend champ. All right, well, we can't win this challenge here, but hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Hopefully you're enjoying this underrated series as we continue to push along. Please comment and make requests if you want to, friends, and I will see you guys next time.